There are secrets that don't just haunt you, they dissolve into you, seeping into your skin until you no longer know where you end and the secret begins. They're born in silence, nurtured in forgotten spaces, a dimly lit hallway, a lingering touch, or the steam from a hot shower that blurs the line between right and wrong. Today's story is about a man named Arthur. He was in his 50s and thought he knew all there was to know about love, loss, and loneliness. But he was about to learn that the most powerful feelings often grow in the most forbidden soil, behind closed doors, in a world built for two. This is the story of a forbidden bond, forged in shared grief, and the simple whisper that changed everything. Don't tell anyone. It sinks in deeper, melting away in the hot water. That sentence, the first whisper from my mother in law, Eleanor, echoes in my head even now. I'm a man in my 50s, an architect who spent a lifetime building structures that were solid, predictable. But every time I remember her voice, a quiet demolition takes place inside of me. 2 years ago, I lost my wife, Clara, to a long illness that slowly stole her light. What was left behind was a silence so profound it had weight. The house we'd shared for 30 years felt more like a tomb than a home. The dining table, once alive with laughter and conversation, was perpetually empty. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room sounded like a hammer against the quiet. I was drowning, submerged in the emptiness. Then one day, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was paper thin, trembling with a loneliness I recognized instantly. "Arthur," she said, "it's me. I'm sorry to bother you." It was Eleanor, Clara's mother, 68 years old. Her voice, usually so strong and full of life, was broken. I I don't think I can live alone anymore." She explained that the stairs in her old house had become an enemy, that even carrying groceries felt like climbing a mountain. I couldn't answer right away. In my mind, I tried to picture it. Two people, connected only by the ghost of the woman they'd both lost, existing under the same roof. It felt foreign, almost impossible. But then, she said the one thing that broke through my hesitation. "It's just, the house is so quiet." And in that moment, something in my chest cracked open. "I understand," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Come and stay here." When we started living together, the house transformed. The silence was broken by the sounds of life. The smell of coffee and toast in the morning, the steady hum of the washing machine in the afternoon. Just having someone else there, another presence, made all the difference. We were two lonely ships adrift in the same sea of grief, finding a quiet comfort in our shared harbor. But then, at night, a different kind of intimacy, an unintended one, began to grow. It started innocently enough. One evening, Eleanor emerged from her bathroom, holding onto the doorframe. "Arthur," she said, a note of embarrassment in her voice, "could you do me a favor? I can't quite reach my own back anymore." The first time I stood behind her in the steamy bathroom, a washcloth in my hand, I felt a profound sense of awkwardness. This was my mother in law. The air was thick with an unnamed closeness. "Thank you," she whispered, turning her head slightly. That helped so much. The smile she gave me wasn't a mother's smile, it was a woman's, one that held a vulnerability and a relief I'd never seen before. The scent of her lavender soap mixed with the steam, and for a moment I felt a little dizzy. It's, it's no problem," I stammered, my own voice a little shaky. There was no way she didn't notice. The air between us was electric. As I helped her out into the cold, tiled hallway, her hand gripped my arm. She paused, looked directly into my eyes, and said the words that rewired everything. "Don't tell anyone about this, not even Mark." Mark was her son, my brother-in-law. That one sentence, that plea to keep our secret, sent everything spiraling. The next night and the night after, the ritual repeated. But it was different. It was no longer about helping an elderly woman. It had become something else. In the small, private world of the bathroom, our defenses seemed to melt away with the steam. "Could you, a little firmer?" she'd whisper, her voice barely audible over the running water. As I did, my fingers would glide over her skin, which was surprisingly soft. I could feel the tension in her shoulders release under my touch. Her breathing would deepen, and in the quiet of the room, it sounded like a sigh. The space between us began to change, not just at night. The invisible lines in the house seemed to be redrawn. At the dinner table, our eyes would meet for a second too long. Passing each other in the hall, there was a new awareness, an unspoken current flowing between us. The house was no longer just a refuge from grief. It had become the container for our secret. One morning, as I was pouring coffee, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun filtering through the window and creating a halo around her silver hair. "I love this smell," she said softly. "It makes the house feel alive again." "Me too," I replied. "Your hands," she said, her eyes on them as I set her mug down. "They're so warm and strong. They remind me." She trailed off, but I knew. She was remembering her husband, and I, in those moments, was remembering Clara. We were filling voids for each other in ways we didn't dare name. As the days turned into nights, the anticipation would begin to build. The sound of the shower starting became a signal, an invitation into our private world. I would check the non-slip mat, place a fresh towel and a new bar of soap on the shelf. It was a silent, practiced ritual. That night, as I stood outside the frosted glass of the shower door, her silhouette moving like a watercolor ghost, she called out, "Arthur, I'm here. Would you mind if we took our time today?" she asked, her voice holding a fragile hesitation. It just, it feels so nice. It felt like my own mind was being gently caressed. The warm steam enveloped me as I stepped inside. The only sound was the drip of water on the tile. I lathered the soap and began to gently massage her scalp, my fingertips moving in slow circles. "Oh, that's it," she breathed, her head leaning back. "You're better than any salon." I was careful not to use my nails, only the soft pads of my fingers. My own heartbeat seemed to fall in rhythm with the water flowing into the tub. "Women my age," she said dreamily, her eyes closed. "We don't get touched very much. When you're young, you crave it, but when you get older, you crave it in a different way. Not for desire, but for validation, to know you're still here." She paused. "Without it, you can feel a little lonely, a little invisible." The words were heavier than the hot water, but lighter than the air, and they sank deep inside me. "I see you," I said, and as the words left my mouth, I realized how true they were. She didn't turn, but I could feel her breath catch, a stillness settling over her. After I'd rinsed her hair, she said, "I think I'll sleep well tonight." "Me too." "Don't tell anyone," she repeated, and it was like she was entrusting me with a secret key all over again. That night, the clock in the living room seemed to tick a little softer. The next day, Eleanor suggested we go shopping together. "Just to get out of the house," she said. It was a gray, chilly day. We walked through the local town square. At a stall selling scarves, she picked up a soft, teal-colored wool. "Do you think this color suits me?" she asked, a touch of youthful shyness in her voice. "It's perfect on you," I said honestly. She smiled, and it was like the first hint of spring after a long winter. On the way back, we sat on a park bench. The air was cold, but a warmth radiated in the space between us. Our gloved fingertips were inches apart. In that tiny gap, I could feel the heat of her mixing with mine. "I can still feel you washing my hair," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. Without thinking, I gently placed my hand over hers. The cold wind blew past, but we sat there unmoving in a comfort that was beyond words. When we got home, as Eleanor stepped into the dim light of the entryway, she turned back and said, "Tonight, lock the door." That was all she said, but I understood. Another invisible line had just been crossed. That night, as I stepped into the bathroom and heard the click of the lock, the world seemed to shrink to the size of that room. The hot water ran, the mirror fogged, and everything outside ceased to exist. "Thank you." Eleanor's voice was wet. I wasn't sure if it was from the steam or emotion. I stood behind her, washcloth in hand, and began the familiar motion. when I ask you to do this, she said, her voice low and contemplative. It's frightening because it makes me feel like a woman again. I didn't know how to respond. Any words felt inadequate. It's not about going back, I finally said, my own voice husky. You've always been one. A long silence followed. I felt her shoulders tremble. We didn't speak much more that night, but as we walked down the hall, the darkness seemed to pull us closer. I couldn't sleep, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the residual warmth of the bathroom on my skin. I could swear I could feel her presence through the wall, a silent breathing in the dark. The days that followed passed in a haze. The intimacy of the bathroom began to bleed into our daily lives. A light touch of hands when passing the salt, a shared glance over the morning paper. We were building a world for two. One afternoon, resting on that same park bench, Eleanor began talking about her late husband, Clara's father. He was a good man, she said, but always in a hurry, even when he'd wash my hair. It was just another task to get through. She turned to me. You're different. You're so gentle. The words lodged in my throat. I wasn't his replacement or a placeholder for her daughter. In that moment, she saw me, Arthur, as a separate person. The feeling was both terrifying and exhilarating. That evening, as we washed dishes together in the kitchen, Eleanor's voice rose above the sound of the running water. I wonder, this life of ours, how long can it last? I want it to last forever, I said, the honesty of it surprising even myself. Eleanor didn't reply. She just stilled her hands in the soapy water. That night at the bathroom door, she looked back at me. Lock it, she said. But this time there was something else in her voice, an urgency, an invitation. And please, like, wash me. That whisper, wash me, echoed in my head, merging with the words of that first night. As the lock clicked into place, I knew there was no turning back. I stepped into the steam. She was standing there, her back to me. Come here, she said, her voice a mere breath. I took a deep breath and picked up the washcloth. All reason, all societal norms dissolved. Nothing mattered but this room, this woman. My mother-in-law and me, two souls trapped in a secret wrapped in steam. She handed me the cloth. Wash my back. Her voice trembled. I nodded, though she couldn't see. I slowly moved the cloth from her shoulders down to her waist. My fingers traced the droplets of water, drawing soft lines on her skin. Our breaths mingled. I could feel the contours of a woman's body beneath my hands. Go, all the way, she whispered, and the words sent a surge of heat through me. The cloth fell from my hand. The warmth of her bare skin was electric against my palm. Her voice broke, a sound that was half protest, half plea. My restraint, already stretched thin, finally snapped. I touched the nape of her neck and she gasped. It's been so long, she breathed, her voice catching. She turned to face me, her eyes wide and wet. In that moment, she was no longer my mother-in-law. She was Eleanor, a woman. And my reason collapsed. Her thin shoulders trembled. As our lips drew near, our breath was hotter than the water. Don't tell anyone, she whispered, just like the first night. But now there was no escape. When our lips met, the world turned upside down. Her fingers dug into my back. The bathroom, which should have been a quiet space, was filled with heavy breaths and forbidden whispers. It's okay, I rasped. I locked the door. Every word seemed only to fuel the heat. I don't know how much time passed. Time had lost all meaning. Finally, as our breathing slowed, she rested her forehead against my chest. This is a sin, she said. Yes, I answered, but I can't stop. I just held her. The only sound, the dripping of water onto the tile. That night, sleep was impossible. I could feel her presence through the wall, a silent, charged stillness. The warmth of her skin was imprinted on my hands. The next morning at the breakfast table, there was a new intimacy between us. A smile meant only for someone who shares your secret. Can you help me again tonight? She asked, and my heart began to pound again. We couldn't go back. The forbidden nights we could tell no one about would continue. But then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Mark, Eleanor's son, was standing there. "Hey, Arthur," he said, his voice casual. "Just thought I'd stop by and see how Mom's doing." Eleanor came out from the kitchen, her smile a little too bright. "Mark, what a surprise." "Hey, Mom," he said, hugging her. "You're looking well, got some color in your cheeks." He looked from me to his mother and back again, a curious glint in his eye. "He's taking good care of you." "We take care of each other," Eleanor said quickly. Throughout his visit, an undercurrent of tension filled the air. Every time Eleanor and I glanced at each other, I felt Mark's eyes on us. He stayed for dinner, and the silence around the table was heavy. I could feel his suspicion like a storm cloud gathering overhead. After he left, Eleanor was visibly shaken. "He knows," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I think he knows something's wrong." "It's okay," I tried to reassure her. "I'll protect you." But that night, when the lock on the bathroom door clicked, it sounded like a desperate final act. "Deeper," she pleaded, her voice frantic. "Make me forget." We clung to each other as if it were the only way to fight back against the outside world. The steam hit us and our breaths intertwined. "If he finds out," she sobbed, "we'll lose everything." "Don't think about it," I whispered in her ear. "It's just us now." But in that moment, in the height of our desperate passion, we heard it. Footsteps in the hall. My entire body went rigid. Eleanor let out a small, terrified gasp. I clamped my hand over her mouth, my heart hammering against my ribs. A low voice came from outside the door. "Mom, are you in there? Are you okay?" It was Mark. He had come back. We held our breath frozen. The steam suddenly felt cold. The thin wooden door was the only thing separating our secret from total ruin. We could hear him shifting his weight outside. My heartbeat roared in my ears like a drum. If he heard it, it was all over. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then finally, we heard his footsteps retreating and the sound of the front door closing. The danger had passed. Eleanor clung to me, shaking uncontrollably. He almost... "It's okay," I said, though my own voice was trembling. "We're safe." But we weren't. We could never be safe again. I kissed her. A kiss meant to chase away the fear, but it was also a signal, an acknowledgement that even terrified, we couldn't stop. In that small, sealed room, surrounded by hot water, we fell back into each other, an act of both desperation and defiance. We had reached the point of no return. Arthur and Eleanor found each other in a space between grief and desire, love and taboo. Their relationship, born in secret and sustained by silence, is a testament to the complexity of the human heart. Is this a story of love born from loneliness, or a transgression that went too far? Where is the line between comfort and sin? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave your comment below and let us know what you would have done in their situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with others. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about the complicated relationships that shape our lives. Thank you for listening.